Europe is about to make a major pivot in its China policy. And just like in the Russia-Ukraine war, Europe is divided. We'll discuss the latest developments after this short break. Now, back to the news. European politicians are divided over how to deal with China. Some want a tougher stance. Others want to maintain the status quo. And these divisions are only growing. Let me explain. Earlier this week, the European Parliament passed a resolution. It called for an end to EU-China relations as we know it. The Parliament is not a legislative body, but its resolutions are important because they set the tone for the EU's foreign policy. This resolution was passed almost unanimously. 813 members voted in favor, only 19 against. It is a clear reflection of the mood in the European Parliament, the anger towards China, and this resolution is going to have real-world consequences. It will guide the European Union's foreign policy in 3 key areas. No. 1. Trade. The resolution calls for a review of the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, or TSI. It was signed in December 2020, but it has still not been ratified by EU member states. The investment deal is basically dead now. The resolution calls for a new one, a new agreement that protects European companies. In other words, a tougher trade deal. Then we come to Taiwan. The resolution backs Taiwan's participation in international organizations. It also calls for a new EU-Taiwan partnership. All of this is being done to annoy Beijing. The One China policy is a red line for Beijing. If Brussels gets too cozy with Taipei, it will be a diplomatic disaster. And finally, there's the issue of sanctions. The resolution calls for more sanctions on China. It wants the EU to impose sanctions over alleged human rights abuses. Now, this resolution does not represent the views of all Europeans. You see, there is no point pretending that the European Union is a monolith. It is not. There are sharp divisions within, especially on China. Some countries like Germany want closer ties with China. They see Beijing as an economic partner, not an ideological rival. Germany's new government is trying to strike a careful balance. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has refused to criticize China's human rights record. He says that would be counterproductive. Instead, he wants to work with Beijing. He wants to work with China to solve global problems like climate change. The hard line on China is not very popular in Germany. Only 27% of Germans believe that the EU should decouple from China. A majority wants to maintain close ties. So what explains this pivot? Well, for starters, there is the fear of missing out, or FOMO as they say. The China-EU trade relationship is already worth 600 billion euros. That's around $650 billion. Germany is the biggest beneficiary. Its exports to China were worth around 98 billion euros last year. These numbers are too big to ignore. Then you have France. President Emmanuel Macron sees China as a competitor, not a rival, believes that Europe needs China's help to counter American hegemony. So Macron is not keen on decoupling either. What about the countries that support decoupling, like the Netherlands, Denmark, and Poland? Well, their combined GDP is less than that of Germany, so it's a hard sell for them. Having said that, public opinion is slowly turning against China across Europe. Last year, 55% Europeans had a negative view of China. The numbers have remained more or less the same in 2022. But if you look closely, you can find some worrying trends. More and more Europeans are seeing China as a threat, not just a rival. The threat is not military yet, but economic. Beijing's aggressive moves in the South China Sea, its tacit support for Russia's war, all of this is making Europeans nervous. Simply put, Europe is at a very delicate juncture. It wants to take on China, but it is not ready to decouple just yet. It is a tough balancing act, and one that could define Europe's future.